Um,
Well, now we are live. So welcome to everyone to our Doing Ecological Economics webinar. Sorry, I had double voices because I opened also the online stuff. So before we dive into our conversation today, I would like to introduce ourselves. So I will start to give the idea to our audience who I am. I'm researcher at the French Institute of Research on Agriculture and Environment in France, and I am an economist. Specialized in ecological economics, and we have together now we are together with Liza. So please, Liza,
okay. Thanks,
tell us.
Zaf, and thanks, Chris. I'll hear from you if you want us to call you Doctor or just Chris. But thank you so much for having me. My name is Liza Makombore. I am second year PhD student and fellow at the University of Vermont, USA. My supervisor is Josh Farley, and I am really, really excited to be here. What else can I say? I'm also, I'm a Gand Institute for the Environment Fellow and also a fellow of the Leadership for the Ecozoic. I'm interested in research interest around sort of essential resources, food, water, and energy, and how that is sort of interacting with the ecological crisis and, broadly speaking, ecological economics. Yeah, so that's me, and I'll hand over to Chris.
Thank you so much, Liza. So, to our audience, here is our guest. He's a senior clinical professor at University of Colorado, but we would like him to introduce himself and tell us a little bit more to his qualification and his interest. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Pleasure.
So, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. So I'm happy to be here in the online space and looking forward to the discussion. So so my name is Chris Becker. I'm a faculty member at Colorado State University at the College of Business. And my backdrop is both economics and philosophy, and so I work mostly on areas that overlap between between economics and philosophy, in particular ethics. I work in various fields of applied ethics, specifically business ethics, and I have a specific interest in ethical aspects of sustainability and the sustainable economy. So that's why I guess what we are discussing today. So
Cool. Thanks a lot. And we are really excited to have you today. And for the first question, we would like to set the stage so that we get more knowledge about some of the concepts you are mobilizing in the paper we're talking about today. So can you provide a brief summary of your paper's main findings and key arguments you are making in that paper, please?
So the main point I'm making is that I'm highlighting that sustainability to me has an inherent ethical dimension. So sustainability is a normative concept in a certain way. The ethical dimension, I think, is rather complex and complicated and broad. In short, it involves our moral relationship with contemporaries around the world, with future people, and with nature all together. That I call it the integrated view on all these three relationships, the systematic study of all three I call sustainability ethics. So the problem I'm highlighting in the paper is that the dominant current conception of the capitalist market economy and its underlying theoretical foundations are also based on some ethical underpinning, which is so way narrower than what is the ethical dimension of sustainability. So we have an enormous discrepancy between, so to say, the underlying ethics of the modern economy and modern economics, and the ethics that comes with the sustainability challenge. So that's my main, I wanted to highlight. And my conclusion from that is, in order to get a sustainable economy, to transition toward a sustainable economy, we need to be aware of this ethical limitations and need to develop a new ethical underpinning that is fully able to support such a new sustainable economy. So, and I think ecological economics as an inter and transdisciplinary field is that studies sustainability, isn't it? And particular sustainable path towards a sustainable economy is particularly suited to promote these kind of discussions about a new ethics and new sustainability ethics. So that's my main point. So.
Okay.
Oh, very interesting. So you mentioned some concepts like ethics kept coming, and ethics of sustainability, especially. Like, what do you understand by ethics itself?
So my definition is ethics is the systematic study of the right and the good, of norms and values, of what one ought to do, what is there's specific ethical questions: what are rights, what is just, what is a good life or good society. So that's my definition of ethics. Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. And then you also mentioned some limits of current state of affairs, if I can put it like that, saying that if I use exactly the word in the paper, saying the Western traditional way of thoughts, it's especially capitalist market economy, even if it considers some ethical aspects, it still limited. But can you tell us why exactly you somehow bring those limits, and what are they? Maybe you mentioned also somehow like economic actor as we understand it in economic theories or economic rationality. So can you share with us a philosophy behind that economic actor or unit you think it's one of the limiting factor?
Yeah, so you see the economics or economic thought is of course interested in how people act in the economic context. So we call that the economic actor. So that would be the person that engages in the economy. And very broadly, I guess the economy can be defined as all the activities and organizations that deal with with production, distribution, consumption, disposal of goods and services to satisfy needs and wants. So the people engage in that because they want their needs and wants to be satisfied. These are the economic actors. And of course, it's always an underlying question in the history of economic thought: what are good ways to organize that, to organize these entire processes that satisfy needs and wants? And with that, the economic actor has always been analyzed as well. And in the modern economic thought, there's a very specific view of how that works, so to say. In the modern economic view sees the economic actor mostly as a self-interested person that cares about the own needs and wants, or in modern terms, own preferences, and cares about the own preferences only. So technically, this occurs in modern economics very prominently as a rational utility maximizer, isn't it? So, and there's a certain very specific idea of rationality. Basically, the idea is the economic actor cares about your own preferences, but is able to do so in a rational way, which means is able to order all these preferences systematically and maximize this, optimize their satisfaction under some budget constraints. So the main point is it's a very narrow rationality concept, because generally rationality means some ability of the human mind, or some general ability, I should say, to proceed in a logical or order. But this is a very narrow, economic rationality is very specifically defined. And there are several problems with that are, some of them are well known. So one is it's very abstract and theoretical. In real world, people don't make decisions like that usually. So that has been discussed broadly in behavioral economics and beyond. However, usually it was said, as long as we can explain and predict things in the economic realm, it's a useful concept. So, but it is quite obvious that it's limited. And one point with sustainability to me is it's limited. We see a lot of people and movements around the world where all kind of economic actors seem to systematically factor in concerns for the environment, for other people, future people. So we have large trends in green consumption, green investment, sustainable investment, and business world. So one thing I'm concerned is that the model cannot really capture that well and model that and explain what is happening, or what, so that it misses something in that regard. But the bigger point is there's a second logic in that entire related to that rationality and the economic actor. And that's the most interesting part to me about modern economic thought. You have these individuals that are rational because they maximize their own utility, or they're self-centered, okay? But there is an interesting thought in modern economics that all these self-interested behavior automatically leads to some good outcome. Adam Smith famously talked about the invisible hand. Okay, you have self-interested people; they all care only about themselves and their own interests. But interestingly enough, something good comes out of that, and nobody knows it, intends it. That had been very influential in modern economics. That reoccurs as we have all these people on the market. They all care about maximizing their own function, utility, or profits. But it magically happens under a lot of conditions that the output is very efficient. So you have a separation between the individual motivation and some kind of a good outcome. That is interesting, but it has also some limitations, obviously. But in the light of the sustainability challenge, it's just falling short, and that's my main problem with it. The idea that there is a systematic rationality that makes that everything is fine at the end, but it's not, because the system is not made to care about the well-being of nature or the planet or future people, or people that cannot bring in their interest fully to market transaction. So it's just not fit for the sustainability challenge. You see, that's one of my main points. You have a very limited idea of a rationality system that somehow seems to produce something good, but it does not produce the good that we need in the sustainability context. So caring about future people, about non-human beings, about people around the world. The system is far away from that dimension, so to say, that we need to tackle. That's the main challenge of today's age of the Anthropocene. And the system goes back to the times of Adam Smith. So it's a cool idea, but it's outdated. So that's I try to explain my main concern with what I call the underpinning, the methodological and ethical underpinning of modern economic thought. It's just that limitation to, is it somehow good for individuals and society? Maybe in certain ways. But today's question is it good for future people, for non-human beings, for the planet, people around the world? And that's a way bigger question. You see, we're using a limited design system and idea and have way bigger challenges. So that's a discrepancy I try to highlight. I think that's a major point. That's why I'm saying we need to really seriously think about that friction we have in the entire way we designed our conception of a modern economy, and need to move towards a new, broader idea to be able to have something like a sustainable economy. So that's my point of that. So.
Excellent.
Yeah, well, that made me think exactly to the following question. I was like, you mentioned in the paper that we need to draw on broader intercultural compatibility approaches to conceptualize, in addition to Western traditional thought. So, can you give us an example of a non-Western worldviews and value systems that can inspire, let's say, a new economic conception and narrative, especially that supports sustainable economy?
Yeah, so that's also a tricky topic overall. So I'm indeed highlighting in the paper that we should be very careful to not rely on Western tradition of thought in developing a sustainability ethics. And quickly, before I'm answering your specific question, how we could do that, there's two reasons for that. I just wanted to motivate why that is important. So one reason is a lot of sustainability questions are global, isn't it? So
Yeah.
we need some global support agreement and have to move in with a lot of things in the same direction. So for ethical underpinning, we want also to make sure we find a value basis, a normative basis, an ethical basis that is broadly supported and shared. So that speaks to make sure we pull from all kind of cultural traditions and find the common ground, because of the global size of of some of the problems, at least. Secondly, I wanted to mention that it's maybe well known or discussed. It is part of the problems we have might have their roots maybe in some tradition of Western thought, say it that way. The way nature has been seen as inferior and humans as superior. So the very conception of nature, the way the rationality concept, what we just discussed about how we see the economy, a lot of that comes out of certain traditions of Western thought. So I think we should be generally careful about that and realize that, and it's then therefore important to, if we want to move ahead to a new ethical underpinning, that we are not uncritically use concepts that are part of the problem or tradition. So that's why I'm saying that we should make sure we have a broad intercultural basis and foundation for sustainability ethics. I'm not saying so that the Western tradition has to offer a lot, so, and I'm coming from that, so it's a diverse way of thinking. So there's a lot of different ways so we can, of course, we find inspiration and important starting points in the Western tradition, just to say that. So that's not one way of thinking. So that's a very broad tradition. But coming back to your question, sorry, is that possible and how could that be done? Is there examples for that? I have to say that because I'm coming out of the Western tradition, my knowledge is very limited, okay? So the general thing is, that just requires a lot of discussions with people that have solid knowledge in other cultural traditions. But I give you quickly one example. I worked with a colleague that is an expert in Buddhism, okay? And I found it fast. So we discovered that there is actually a connection, a common ground between Aristotelian, so Western-based Greek virtue ethics and Buddhist virtue ethics. And so we use that link, and virtues, as many ethics, I just wanted to say that, have intercultural links. You find interesting links between Greek philosophy and Chinese philosophy. You find the golden rule, don't do to others what you do not want them to do to you.
Mm.
You find that in many cultures. So I'm saying there is common ground. It just has to be explored and made fruitful for sustainability ethics. So with the Buddhism, just to give you that example, it turned out that there is an interesting common ground when it comes to virtues, to excellent character traits, and how people make systematic, rational decision based on that, and how that could be used to envision a personhood and decision making that would care about future people and non-human beings.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lot from that Buddhist tradition because it adds something to Aristotle's virtues that the Western tradition does not actually have that much. A couple of very interesting points. Just to mention one, the Buddhist tradition has way stronger has developed a lot of practices in meditation that can be made fruitful to develop virtues. So that is not that prominent in Western tradition. So that's just an example how that can be inspiration. You find common ground and you can learn from different approaches, cultural traditions, different things that you can make fruitful and get maybe together to develop a common basis, a good, in my point of an ethics for sustainability in my interest. So that is what I can say about that. But generally, it's that's a major challenge because traditions are complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Not a single person knows all of that, and it has a lot to do with having a really good discourse. We sometimes lacking that, isn't it? A good discourse about ethics across cultures. So I generally would think that should be promoted as part of a sustainability ethics approach, intercultural a good discourse about ethical topics. Yeah.
Yeah. We are all smiles because we were discussing earlier with Zaf. So both of us will be attending the International Society Ecological Economics biannual conference. It's happening in Colombia this year. And Zaf is doing a plenary, which she can explain later on, but it's around sort of African worldviews and cosmologies. And then we are doing a paper, myself and a colleague of mine, Julia Danielson. We are we're going to be presenting a paper that we are busy with right now, which is sort of connecting Ubuntu, which is an African philosophy. It's based on an aphorism which says, I am because we are. And it connects the economic actor, if you want, or the individual with everything, both, human and non-human. And in the paper, we talk a lot about the the rational consumer versus we were calling it a relational consumer, but in talking to our supervisors, we're going to be sort of, because they were challenging, the relational consumer and saying it still has the economic actor, which is the uh, rational consumer. So I wanted to ask you, because it seems to me that the call in your paper is to really try and bring these intercultural ethics and um, and perhaps amplifying them so that they can be like a mediating. I don't know. So I wanted your thoughts on that. Is it going to act like a mediating factor, or are they coming into like a polyverse with what is currently there? What exactly were you calling for? That will help us, myself and my colleague, to perhaps place our paper better in terms of responding to some of your calls in your paper. I don't know if I make sense. So what I'm asking is, how are you sort of envisioning this sustainability ethics, and in how it is including other, even indigenous voices, or other sort of philosophies and ethical standards. Is my question clear?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Okay.
I like the approach. I think that is would be of real of interest to me, what you are doing there. So if you have a paper, please send it to me. So I really would like to see that.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, generally, as I said, so I think there's limitations in the entire ethical underpinning of
Mhm.
the modern economic conception. That goes back to some limitations in some traditions of Western thought,
Mhm.
where this comes from. And the particular limitation is also mostly that there's not really a good concept of nature in the entire
Okay.
approach. So a lot of traditions, as far as I know, that a lot of cultures had way better, or way more elaborated conceptions of the human nature relationship
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
ideas of.
I guess, Chris, what I'm saying is, can capitalism have an ethic? Can it absorb, these other? How do we do that? How do we integrate? Since in its nature, like you are saying, it's based on, sort of Western ethic, which I think to a great extent, like the way I analyze rationality and self-interestedness, it's not very inclusive.
Mhm.
It's very much not tolerant to like diversity and the complexity of that diversity. So I'm questioning, can this sort of capitalist or economic thought and practice, can it have an ethic broadly, and how does it integrate
Yeah,
other ethics? Yeah.
yeah. I'm not sure. I mean, that's a tricky question. Can we modify or further develop the system we have, a capitalist market economy, that it
Hmm.
would include that it
Hmm.
would have that basis, and then not systematically ruin the planet, but care about the environmental effects and effects to future people? I tend to think it's possible.
Okay.
Um, but because I guess one of my points is this view of the economic actor. Okay,
Hmm.
this is an extreme reduction of what the human being is
Yes.
it? And it's mostly has been for theoretical purposes. Nobody would claim that explains what the human being is. That would be
Hmm.
strange. We're not rational utility maximizers. At least I would find that strange. However, because it's interesting. Social science is theory and reality at the same time, in also in that way that it influences how people see themselves and they act. So you have a reinforcement. Some people
Yes.
in business see themselves as rational. They optimize just that.
Hmm.
That's I think they reduce themselves, and that it's also not good for them. It's not good to reduce yourself to that. So what I'm thinking is it's already there. It's not something you bring it from somewhere outside to the system. I think people have that in them, that they are more than that and that they care about others and nature. It just needs to be systematically um, better. There should be a narrative about that people can relate to. Also, if they do decisions in business, because very often it's said, yeah, I have to make a decision here, but I have to be rational. I have to maximize my profits. I cannot care about that. And that's very unfortunate, because you see that people struggle with that, but it's told to them that it's supposed to be that way, and the system is forcing that direction. So I really believe it's already there, and any inspiration and to change the narrative to a broader conception of what does it mean to be rational in economics.
Okay.
You see, I think it's also rational to be ethical. There's an ethical rationality, and it's
Okay.
rational to understand, because we understand that it's good for us if we relate to nature in a positive way, and it's bad for us. So that's rational. It's not irrational.
Mhm.
Economists very quickly argue if somebody doesn't follow that narrow
It's
paradigm,
irrational.
it's irrational. It's not. It's just differently rational. You see what I'm saying? It's ethically or other. I really believe, and if you go back in the European tradition to Aristotle, Aristotle has 5 concepts of rationality, you see, very broad. And I believe in other cultures you would find that easily as well. What does it mean to be rational? We have to be a more critical discourse. And what does it mean to be economically rational? To me, it's economically irrational to ruin nature because it is economically bad. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And all you are saying, I think there's all kind of points we can start that discussion and bring insight into that. And I really believe it's already kind of there. And if people can relate to it and can justify their actions and realize that, I think that could move us towards maybe a modified market economy. I don't know it. I'm just, but that's
Thanks to both of you. Actually, I have got a question before the webinar that was even stressing something interesting on the paper. Like now you said business and us. And the question was, when you say about Anthropocene economy, who do you put in Anthropocene? Who, when we are conceptualizing, even that is a term which the person who asked the question thought it was also somehow exclusive, because some humans might not be considered in certain decisions, certain conceptualization. So which you target the question of narrative and the ethics of, of optimization, the utility, rationality. You also said maybe there is the caring, and it's very important, I think, to also to mention and to stress on who do we talk about when we say Anthropocene economy, who is included and who is not, because the worry from the person who asked the question was that probably if we reflect back then about the slavery, colonialism, was those human considered in Anthropocene economy that was going on with by then or even now. So because I know the paper used the Anthropocene economy, but did you think about that? What do you think about that aspect?
so. Yeah, there's 2 concepts. I mean, when I use the term the Anthropocene, isn't it? Are you referring to more to that? How I use that term? That term I use more to explain why sustainability is an almost existential question today. So I use that term more to kind of support the idea that we entered a new age, a new epoch of the Anthropocene, and that would just mean the age of human dominance on Earth. And that is more abstract in general terms because the human species has become so powerful that we seem to be the main force that changes the planetary systems, like the oceans and the
At least we think so.
And yeah, that looks like we are changing that, but mostly we are concerned about that change because we think we are overusing the planetary system and we're changing in a way that it's bad for us and future people and nature. But I think you're referring more to that question. I think we have to be fair about that. If I talk about we and humankind, the story is more the richer parts of the world, or those that historically kind of had economic development, very often based on the back of a lot of other people that were exploited. That we could argue that a certain part of the human population mainly caused the situation of the Anthropocene. So in general terms, we talk the human species dominates that planet and ruins the planet. But to be fair, it's the part of the human population, a part overuses the earth more, contributes more to the problem, and others suffer from that. I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to. But that is in the sustainability discourse included. It's about how do we do right to people around the world. And that's to me part of the sustainability question. So that's why I say I have a threefold ethical problem. That's the sustainability ethics problem. How do you do right to people around the world, right to future people, and right to nature, non-human beings? That's why sustainability ethics is such a complex question. Obviously, it's a complex question, but it's not made up. It's just that's the challenge, because there's millions of people that might lose their livelihood on this planet because of flooding and whatever, loss of fertile land, no water supply, and you have hundreds of millions of future people that might be harmed and not be able to live their lives, and you have non-human species, a lot of animals that cannot thrive anymore. So it's a threefold problem, and that's why I think sustainability ethics, to be honest, is a major challenge. How do we do right to all? But it is as it is. I mean, we have to face it. And that's why I also argue it goes beyond most traditional ethics, at least, because this complex question, in my point of view, has never been fully tackled systematically, because it's new and it's difficult. But it is the main challenge we have today. So that I'm not sure if I answered your question right. But
No. It's very clear. I think I got the question, but also I knew that in the paper you paid attention to say the people around the world, which means also when we try to include indigenous people and everyone, it's a real answer to this question. But I mean, it's in terms of narrative and conceptualization, it's something that has to be understood and also take care of. But as you mentioned, like challenges and also the complexity of the sustainability question, which is probably one of the reasons why we have some simplification current, let's say, models and the way of doing in practice. So then this brings my question about, like, what are some of ethical challenges or trade-offs you encountered while developing this framework? Because there is always this program with at least ecological economics that we have theories, we understand. I think it's what you said. Everybody understands we are more than just monetary aspects. But how then do you see, and how did you encounter challenges in, in framing your work, especially about the trade-offs? Like when we have in practical terms, if we have a decision to take, and how do we prioritize sustainability entities, like different ones you mentioned, like how, what should we give a priority, how to do it in case we know it's complex, but still we have to take decision in uncertain situation.
I mean, that's difficult. It is difficult because I think it, first of all, it depends, of course, on each specific decision and situation. Is that what kind of trade-off is it? What we're talking about? Generally, as I said, I think we are lacking sometimes concepts to consider everything and to have really discuss complex trade-offs among future people, current people around the world. And what very often happens, people focus then on one aspect and say we should do that because that's right to the future people or to nature, but then we maybe might ignore that it's maybe not right to other people in other places. So that's what very often happens. On the other side, so I'm saying sometimes we need maybe really, we would be in need of better ethical conceptions like justice conceptions that can capture everything.
Mm-hmm.
But that's more the big picture. The other side to that is, I think very often there's actually an easy solution. It's just either not recognized or ignored. So I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of trade-offs, I would think, are not real serious ethical dilemmas, okay? Because a serious ethical dilemma would be if it pitches fundamental rights against fundamental rights, okay? Like if it's about security of life, liberty, and security of the person, of one of people against future people or so. But that is mostly not the case. So I think that a lot of discussions are about things that are ethically obvious, just nobody wants to see it. I give you just examples. Do I have a right to get my T-shirt at the store for 5 cents less? Is that would I really claim that there's an ethical dilemma if I have to pay 5 cents more when it comes on the other hand to people suffering in sweatshops or the environment getting ruined? I would say that's not really an ethical dilemma.
Sure. I have a better example for you. Like when, for example, there is the right of species to survive,
Yeah.
let's say,
Yeah.
and this threat of, let's say, human to live. So
Okay.
you understand what I mean? It's
Yeah.
about the hierarchy
Right.
between species and.
Yeah. That would be, I guess, a more serious ethical dilemma. That's for sure. And I generally doubt that. I think we have more of these made-up dilemmas. I just was in the sustainability discussion. I really think that. I think the most of the conflicts are more about self-interest and things like that, where the ethics is obvious. Okay, I just wanted to highlight that the ethics is obvious, but people resist because they don't want to give a little bit up or so. But your example is a real one, isn't it? So there can be a serious ethical dilemma. What if it's really about protecting a species, and the only way to do that would be that some people would have to leave that area or cannot use it for agriculture, and that is also that can happen, isn't it? And that's a serious ethical dilemma, because then you pitch that, then you have a conflict between two pretty fundamental ethical values or rights. I don't know if I have a good answer to that. First of all, I'm even not sure if there's not solution that can consider both rights. So is it possible to do still maybe agriculture in the area in a way that would allow the species to exist? So I would always try to solve a dilemma by finding a solution that somehow solves the dilemma without completely compromising or ignoring the right of one part. I'm not sure if it's not possible, we are maybe really stuck. I don't know. How to prioritize fundamental rights? Maybe, I don't know. As I said, in sustainability ethics, part of the project would be to develop good answers to that we might not have yet. But I think it's very, very often we are not coming to a very hard point of a very hard choice. There might be either the dilemma is not really one, or the dilemma is one that might be solved in a way that we are not in a situation where we have to fully disregard one part. But I'm just trying to. Maybe you see that. Maybe you have an example where it doesn't work. I don't know. Yeah.
Sure, it's interesting.
I think that's why the paper is I found it very like intriguing but also challenging. Like when you speak about these ethical dilemmas, and that you gave, Zaf, where you're looking at species, or biodiversity, and then human needs, Africa, and how conservation has been done. I think for me the ethical dilemmas become even more exacerbated because of the conflicts that it creates. And I think whatever sustainability ethics, it really also needs to consider, though, like how to also minimize those conflicts. And I think that's where the trade-off question was emanating from. But having said that, we have a comment. I think it goes back to our earlier discussion. It's from Julian. They are saying Julian is from New Zealand. First of all, they were highlighting that the First Nations people of the Maori, I hope I'm saying it correctly, I apologize if I am not, say they are intertwined with the land being, which is the Tangata Wenua. I hope I'm saying it correctly, as part of their culture and belief system. I think Julian was just providing us another example of those intercultural ethical value systems. And then later on, Julian is also saying, I would think economics should support the ethics of natural slash creation sciences being sustainable and resilient, not just what humankind wants to take away from it. So I think they're bringing in the whole debates around resilience and sustainability, like perhaps how those trade-offs need to be considered. So thanks, Julian. I don't know, Chris, you want to reflect on those comments? Or Zaf, any one of you?
I let you now Chris respond to that, but I would like to add something before we
Okay.
continue. Like I was just thinking when we were discussing, like what aspect of faith or spirituality fit into the sustainability ethic? Can it bring some solution to our dilemma and thoughts here? What do you think about that also, in addition to what
Mhm.
Liza said?
Mhm. So first of all, I like the comment, and I would also like to re-emphasize that in that specific view, economic view out of a certain Western tradition, nature has been degraded to a mere object for human purposes, and that there's a problematic view of nature underlying, and that comes out of a certain idea how humans are superior to nature and can manipulate nature for their own good and purposes. Actually, it's underlying actually also to a certain extent modern science and engineering, because the idea of that project was, if we understand nature better, we can control it better and make it more useful. But that sees nature as an object for human purposes, isn't that? And many other cultures didn't. And actually, also in the big tradition of European thought, you find a lot of a lot of people that were critical about that, and were saying we have to see nature differently, because that is not only ruining nature but also ruining the human being in the long run. So and I believe a lot of traditions, cultural traditions, had a pretty clear understanding of how the human being ultimately is part of nature and not separated from nature, and can only thrive as being part of nature and with nature, not against nature. So that I think that is an important aspect of sustainability to come back to that, or to reemphasize that. But I think your question, Safa, is more is going to the spirituality aspect. I think ethics and spirituality and faith are overlapping in a certain way, because a lot of traditions do not do something but like Western ethics or so, which is more kind of tries to more analytically or so maybe analyze the question of the good and the right. But the good and the right also has been reflected upon in all kinds of religious traditions and other spiritual traditions. So I think that is an important source as well, isn't it? To kind of draw insights from all these traditions. It's just at the end of the day, it would be ideally be. I think it would be most fruitful all that if it can be can be made useful or enter a discourse, a global discourse among where that can be, where it can be in some way explained to other people in other cultures, so to say, and then you have a mutual inspiration. But I think that's part of, you see, that is maybe a part of the job of academics or in the realm of ecological economics. That's maybe our job, so to say, to write about it, to write about it in English. That I do. The German have a lot of German. You see, it's not sometimes even difficult, even if it's pretty. You would think German is part of Western tradition, should be easy to translate that into English. Some of the traditions and German Romanticism, I wrote about that. It's actually not. You immediately realize there's a language barrier there. But I think that's part of the job. Ideally, you would hopefully find the huge insight into spiritual tradition, into cultural traditions, very often not written down even. You see, so. And we are, unfortunately, we are losing a lot of very important knowledge because it has never been written down. But pull from that and kind of bring it into a discourse. I think that would be cool if that would be more done, more encouraged. And as I said, a big part to me of sustainability ethics project is to have a better, to do more ethics discourse and ethics research. And I think ecological economics, I'm repeating myself as a inter-transdisciplinary field, is actually a good place that could support that. I believe that. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. It's actually it somehow aligns with the new approaches that are being pushed. For example, the recent report of AdBest, it's trying to show how the worldviews, which is basically the background that we have from our culture, our different background where we live, has something to do with how we see the world and the scenario we will push forward and the behavior we have. So if the ethics and the moral aspects will also get some, how can I say, the basis in maybe spirituality, even if we don't especially include that aspect in the current modeling, but we might understand that some scenarios that we will put forward will be impacted with what we see. But now we have been talking, let's say, about challenges, trade-offs, how things are complex and not so easy to make it operational. But as we have 5 or 6 minutes to go, I want us to at least finish on a positive vibe, talking about some solutions that we have there, because we are still having to support decision making in different arena. So what do we have there that can still be our foundation while we try to add some other narratives in conceptualizing somehow framework that include these ethics, and non-human or human around the world and other aspects that is necessary to include in our framework and conceptualization. Because in the paper you mentioned that we still have welfare functions and based on utilitarianism that can be a first maybe let's say some solutions can build up there when we try to provide more convincing solution, going away to anthropocentrism and utilitarianism. How can we include non-human, for example, in our modeling?
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't really have a really good technical answer to that. I mentioned, I mean, generally, I fully agree with you. The interesting aspect of social sciences, like economics, is there's a link between the conceptualization, the modeling, and the narrative and the worldviews. Okay, and so if it and then you have people acting in business context, economic context that are influenced by that. So it's very important to find a new way to explain and how decision making can work in a way that it's rational to be sustainable. And I think it is rational to be sustainable. I hear that from people in business contexts all the time. They want to make decisions and make decisions about sustainability, but they have no good narrative supporting it, and they struggle with it because they have to justify and explain the action. So I agree with that. With the modeling, I'm not sure. I think I mentioned examples that has been done with utilitarian approaches where non-human beings, animals, have been included in the modeling because utilitarianism can do that. Well known that also from the ethics and philosophy point of view, if you base an ethics on pain and pleasure, the thought that higher animals have pain and pleasure as well, and that they should be included is pretty obvious. So that's why it has been done. I mentioned it to show that even in the frameworks we have, it can be done, it has been done. Still, I would think it's to me like a band-aid. It's an add-on. So the logic is still too much the logic that is part of the but you want to have a positive ending. So I'm trying to I think the positive part to all that is, so I'm always more optimistic than pessimistic. Why? Because as I said, I'm seeing, at least in the limited things I'm looking at, that people are really concerned and they are making decisions that consider sustainability in businesses, in consumption, in investment. We see that. So that's not something, it's just maybe too slow and too limited. How can we support that by conceptions out of the realm of ecological economics or economics? I would think there needs to be more fundamental work done. For instance, I believe that a virtue-based approach would go farther than a utilitarian-based approach, because it would change more how do people make decisions. If they make decisions based on virtues, that would be significantly different economic rationality. And there's then probably a better way to conceptualize a bigger conception of welfare we would need. How to see like Adam Smith or modern economics has that idea: individuals make rational decisions in a narrow way, and that leads to a narrow good for society. We need to have a broad idea. How do we have a systematic motivation of individuals making decisions that is good for them in a bigger idea of good, okay? And it's good for society, future people around the world, and nature. So we need to expand that. And for that, I think it would be necessary to have a broader rationality conception. And so that's why I think there is also trends that refer to virtues in economics and virtue ethics. I'm not super familiar with details of the modeling, but from a philosophical point of view, I would think that has a significant potential, and more maybe than the utilitarianism has also potential, but I somehow think there's too much of the old logic in it. Maybe I don't know. So I think there's other traditions that they're close, they're broadly shared, could be linked to different cultures. I'm not saying virtue ethics or virtues are the solution here, but just as an example, and it can be modeled. I believe there is approaches that do that in economics. they model decision making based factoring in virtues, and that have way more potential to a more broader, creative conception of a sustainable economy. So I'm optimistic. I'm not pessimistic. I'm actually more optimistic in certain ways, but I think it requires also way more awareness of people and way more
Yeah.
a way more active discussion and reflected discussion about what you say worldview, or what I call ethical underpinning.
Nice.
So that's what I.
Very interesting. Actually, I have an example based on the work I did with my colleagues in the south of France, where it was about economic valuation. We were more interested in monetary valuation of species based on pollinators like bees. And one aspect popped up when we were doing the design, where people in that area were more concerned by the species in their own right. So that can be like it was interesting for us, and we, in our conceptualization, we added that variables as a reason why people would like to act, for example.
Yeah.
So we're using maybe stated preferences or other demand functions. I assume it can be possible. The question is the acceptability of that, knowing how the value, the economic theories, for example, the value theory is conceptualized. Now the question is, are we willing to accept new adventure, adding more non-human in our way of thinking? Because you said in terms of policy and implementation, we see that businesses are paying attention on those other values that people are expressing about any human like nature. That, well, how do they use them? How to have narratives that push every decision maker to accept the new normal in our societies? This is maybe an ideological question and practical question we will continue to have. And we have Joseph in the comment. Liza, can you tell us what was his question, please?
Okay, so the other one is a comment which I will say later from Mesha. And then Joseph says, we are in need of an example. What would be a key difference in your specific values as presenters that would lead to different sustainability outcomes? So they want to know what's our, your specific values as presenters that would lead to different sustainability outcomes.
So I thought what Safa just said is a good example, isn't it? I mean, people have these values, and I think they have it more, but I think humans always had it. Maybe it just was pushed away, and it coming back because people understand how that matters. So I think people have generally values for nature, for life, respect. I think that is there, but we are not modeling it. And so I like your examples that you're saying you're actually doing that. And, you see, the question is what is the problem? Is it you see, people do something because they actually have a value for nature and it matters to them and it influences their decision. And then is it not strange that then maybe an economist comes along and tells them you're making a wrong decision, you're irrational? You see that I think there's something wrong with the modeling then if it cannot capture what actually is the decision making or what people are actually doing, particularly if it's systematically. So I think people have systematic values for caring about nature, about other people, future people. It's just it has just been almost suppressed, so to say, by a dominant narrative that told them you shouldn't do that. That's not rational. Just focus on yourself. You have this strange conflict sometimes. I think that speaks for me more against the way we model that. If we seem to miss something. So the modeling is irrational, not what people do. So I'm not sure if that was if I understood.
Well, yeah, but
Yeah.
from the question of the Joseph about the
Yeah.
values, we of course we have had frameworks that at least try to include values,
Mhm.
say
Mm,
use and non-use values.
Yeah.
So, like for example, the total economic value framework,
mhm,
it tries to bring all different values together so that we can model them, but still we it's still exclusive, some kind of, let's say, intrinsic values. There are still kind
mhm,
of consensus. Where do we put them? Can we even consider them when we are doing such kind of work? Because in terms of welfare function, for example, how can we include something which is not self-centered?
mm,
Because if we say, for example, the right to exist as a value that somebody is putting on species, we know maybe he feels some kind of satisfaction knowing that species exist. It's
Mhm.
again self-reflected to be able to put it in a way we will say this is a stated preference
Yeah.
and go forward. But we know very well that there might be other reasons and other values, and also, for example, relational values that we might miss in conceptualizing and basing
Mhm.
on some framework that are still
Yeah.
anthropocentric,
Mhm.
anthropocentric and utilitarianist,
mm,
actually. So, he asked that, what are our specific values? I'm not so sure if I understand what he
mm.
means by specific value as presenter. That the fact that we are already trying to talk about ethics, and if we are in ecological economics, we
Mhm.
can maybe answer to his question saying that we have plural, there is plurality
Yeah,
in values. We
mhm.
acknowledge
Yeah.
all
Right.
That's
kind
it.
of
Yeah.
values, and we
Yeah.
know that it's complex, but we at least we have already acknowledged these, let's say, uh, how do we call intrinsic values, for example, relational values, when we talked about, for example, Buddhism or African or spirituality, those
Mhm.
aspects of non-Western way of worldviews and values. It means that we have already a plurality of values
Yeah.
in
Mhm.
ourselves.
Right.
That's what I can
Yeah.
say about that.
Yeah.
Maybe he can also say more about
Mm.
what he meant
Yeah.
with
Um,
specific values.
yeah, Zaf and Chris, I'm just conscious of time, and yeah, because we are like 7 minutes into our time, or 9 minutes. I don't know which watch to follow. But I wanted to say, yeah, maybe you missed also a little bit of the initial conversations to Joseph. We did speak a little bit about the work that we are doing, individually, which may give more information in terms of how we are seeing the values
Mhm.
being included into sort of the sustainability ethics framework. So Mercia says here, it's just a comment around modeling, says, I think that's one of the strengths, but also a challenge for neoclassical economics. I think in speaking about modeling, so they say calculations and modeling should not be the only way to prove something is valuable. So I think
Mhm.
just challenging methods,
Yeah.
yeah, and saying perhaps
Yeah,
we need to also consider other research methods. And lastly, Julian says economists could embrace and consider tools that include sustainability values and the metaphysical. I think the metaphysical, yeah, sort of biophysical limits and all of that.
Mhm.
So I think Julian is also right. Like we need models that recognize the values for, like, future generation, that whole discourse, people now
Mhm.
and nature. So in saying the biophysical limits have to also be included in the modeling if we are going to still go through with modeling economic models. Yeah, so those were the comments. And Zaf, I don't know if you want to close us
No,
or
I'll leave it to Chris
yeah.
and let him tell us a little bit more. But before maybe he answers to that, I think this is also what we address, talking about interdisciplinarity. We need
Mhm.
different approaches and also the complementary methods, you know, to have more to what we can do with the tools that we have now. So I'll leave it to
Please,
Chris.
to close some closing
Yeah,
statements,
some closing
reflections.
statement. Yeah,
Yeah,
personal reflection.
so I mean, but very quickly, what you just both said and discussed about the comment about the values and preferences. There's an interesting conflict here, or a kind of the mainstream economics approach has been that preferences are given in a certain way. It's individuals, but then you have a problem. What if nobody would have a preference for sustainability? Is it then not? Does it then have no value? So you see what that's a problem, I guess. And ethics would argue otherwise. At least most ethics I'm using would make a point. There is fundamental values and rights that can be upheld and argued for, independent of if individuals have a lot of preference or not. Like human rights, would they disappear? Or the value of life? Is it? I mean, ethics would always go more the way and say that is a value that can be established independently of individual preferences, and that's a conflict a little bit. You see in how the approaches work. But I think there's good reasons to see it that way. If you see how different cultures establish the same values in different times, you see in variations. So that supports that idea there is such a thing as fundamental values and rights. Now, overall, all the discussion, I found that very inspiring, and I'm really grateful that you organized that and that I had the chance to join you here, because I got a lot of insights, so I like that, and I like to promote that idea that the ethics perspective would be very valuable for ecological economics, because, as I said, to me, sustainability has an inherent ethical dimension. So ethics is part of it. It's not something add-on. It goes at the core, because the core question is, do we write to future people around the world, non-human species, and how could we do that? So, and I think the discussion also showed me so that there's a lot of potential, and also things are going on that I would really hope that also in the realm of ecological economics that's a good space to have more work and discussion done on such a project of ethics of sustainability. I think that's worth that would can have a lot of inspiration and positive impacts to change the economic narrative and modeling to better support a sustainable economy. So I really liked it that we had a good discussion about it, and yeah. So thank you again for inviting me. Yeah. Oh, you're muted.
So I wanted just to say thank you to both of you, and to give us opportunity to question again the traditional economic thoughts. It's always a pleasure, at least for me, to have this possibility to it's push us to reflect and also to question what we do as researchers and how we used to do it, and to think about it, which is a good way and a good platform to question also to think about other narratives on which to base on new conceptualization as well. So thanks a lot for your time. You have been generous with your time. So
Thanks,
thank you a
Chris.
lot.
Thanks, Zaf.
So
Thank you very much. Have a
bye
good day.
bye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.